Hi everybody. I'm hoping some people are going to jump on here. I wanted to talk about some interesting things that happened in the last couple of days with my situation, and I wanted to see if anybody else had some similar experience or can give me some insight as to this, and then just kind of share something that I've tried to do, some different tactics I've tried. I kind of came to this place because after years and years and years of being in addiction with substances that I used to cope with the feelings and emotions I couldn't deal with and handle, I've done a lot of therapy, I've done a lot of work on myself. And when I went through EMDR therapy, which is a intense trauma therapy, I learned a lot about really where the core of this was and what it came from. I learned that I had something called narcissistic victim syndrome, and it is basically, from having long-term exposure to narcissistic abuse, it then continues into your adult years and is just it's very hard to get out of. Basically, my ticker was broken, or my picker was broken. The thing in me that used to pick people or to bring people in my life was broken, and I intentionally was attracted and sought out and was magnetized to toxic people, narcissistic people. So that's what I've been working on for the past couple of years. But in that process, I also got to do a lot of discovery as to who in my life was toxic, who in my life was not healthy for me and was not safe. I did a lot of boundaries. I did a lot with boundaries and learning how to create boundaries, hold boundaries, and then see how people reacted. And by people's reactions, they kind of narrowed things down. I also journaled patterns with the people closest to me. And this is how I came to find out that both my mother, probably father too, I believe father, and ex-children's father are narcissistic, anti-personality, or antisocial, psychopathy. Like, they've got some cluster B stuff going on. Definitely some narcissistic traits. So learning that, things got really out of hand because I didn't realize the potential or the dangers of exposing that. And I started talking about, my mom being a narcissist on Facebook. And I have 5 siblings, and that didn't go over very well. My parents were very angry, and all of a sudden my life kind of got flipped upside down. I lost my job. My kids got kidnapped, all these crazy things, right? And I remember going to my ex, not realizing so much that it was him. I knew he was toxic, I knew there was stuff, but I didn't think that, I just didn't see it. It was very insidious and very covered up. He always convinced me that, he was the only one who'd never left me. He was the only one, he wanted me to be in my kids' lives, stuff like that. And the more I would tell him about my parents, and the more I wanted to protect my children, he would say no. He would almost take their side. Which is really interesting because he'd always isolated and tried to divide and conquer, get me away from them. So I've had this going on with my parents now for the past while, and I believe that they are if you ask my personal opinion, I can't diagnose anyone. I would believe that my mom is a sadistic sociopath, and I think my dad's a covert narcissist. So that's just my assumptions from what I know of the personality disorders and the patterns and things that have happened over the years. But they want to be around my children. That's been a big thing, and keeping them around my kids. When I've tried to put up boundaries with that, it's not gone over very well. I'm made to look like I'm the bad guy who's trying to keep my children's grandparents from them. They tell me, this might have been your experience with us, but don't you see that they love us? Do you want to keep that from them? And of course I don't. And even after knowing how they were to me in childhood, I wanted my kids to be around them because I believe that they wouldn't be like that to them. That they would treat my kids better because there's still that part in me that inherently isn't worthy of being loved. Like, they couldn't love me, but they'll love them, which now, knowing what I know now, is not how they operate. They'll be exactly the same way to your kids as they were to you, which is terrifying when I think about it, right? So on top of that, my alienated daughter openly said that she didn't hate me or start to hate me until she had this conversation with my mother where my mother made up this lie about me and then really tried to drive things home, convincing her that I had never been abused by my mom and that I was actually the abusive one. There was a time where my mother was very physically abusive, and I think I turned to be about, probably 13, and I'm a 6 foot tall woman now. My mom's about 5'3", 5'4", she's tiny, but I was probably 5'9" at that time, and she'd hit me, or she'd put her hands on me again, threw me up against the fridge, and I put her in a headlock, and it was just like reactive, I don't even remember doing it, and slammed her head into the refrigerator. I remember I was so scared, and she yelled at me, and I ran downstairs crying. She followed me and said, I could have kicked your ass if I wanted to. And that's all she said, but then she never touched me again. So one, that taught me that, physical violence is a way to protect yourself, and set a really bad precedent for that. But that was what she used to telling my daughter, saying that I was physically abusive to her, and that I had lied about any of the abuse I had endured. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. I thought about putting a restraining order on them, and I decided that I would do this. I asked my parents if they would be willing to take the MMPI, which is the Minnesota's version of the Diagnostic Personality Disorder Test. I've taken it, and I'm not a narcissist, I'll tell you that. I do have some borderline tendencies from the CPTSD that I have, but it is written in there that I am very self-aware, open to change, open to treatment. I'm not treatment resistant, and that I have it's all very positive. So I am not disordered in any way. I have the proof and the test to guarantee that. And I was like, you know what? If I'm willing to go out and do that on my own, then anyone who wants to be in my children's lives, or anyone who has nothing to hide, they constantly tell me I'm wrong. They constantly tell me, that it's not, just because I say it doesn't mean it's true. That I can put all these titles on people all I want doesn't mean it's accurate. So I asked them if they'd take it. First response was my dad. I talked to my dad because it's the best way to go about it. And he says, well, why do you want us to take it? And I said, not going to get into it at this point. I don't feel like I owe you any kind of explanations. I'm just asking if you would be willing to take it. You can look it up, see what it's about. Let me know. So a couple minutes later, started getting a lot of texts like, well, what, do you think we're nuts? Is that you think we're nuts and that's why you want us to take it? And I said, I never said that you were nuts, and I don't think you're nuts. I said, I've taken the test, so I'm just asking if you would. All it would do is help secure your time with your grandkids. That's it. And it was a lot of, well, tell us what it's about. And I'm like, you can look into it. You can look it up. You can Google. You're a capable person. So I'm not going to do the work for them. I've done more than enough. They've never listened to anything I've had to say. It's fallen on deaf ears. So at this point, it's like, I'm not going to sit and convince you of all the reasons why you should do this. So he looked it up, and then he wrote back. He said, well, can we get the results of your tests? Hi, Janet. Oh, I love Janet. Janet was someone who kind of helped me on this journey to start recognizing the stuff that was happening from my childhood and working through some of the shame-based language that was occurring in my interactions with my mother, specifically with my parents. So while I was in treatment, and I really appreciate just people that were there to help teach me what was healthy, what wasn't healthy, things that I could start looking at myself. They didn't have to say this is what's happening to you or this is wrong. It was just a matter of helping me, validate me, and helping me find that out on my own. But so again, I asked my parents if they would take the MMPI to secure time with my children. If they are not narcissistic or they are not disordered in any way, then there shouldn't be an issue with taking the test. That's how I felt. So it was, I was not greeted well. He asked me for the results of mine, and I said, absolutely not. One, I know, that it wasn't because they just wanted information, Oh, thank you, Jan. I've been teachable. I hope so. I think there's a time where I wasn't. There's times where I'd be angry. I get angry, and I just am thankful. So I want to be teachable. That's something I'd really like to be. It's hard to be self-aware, and it's hard to look at ourselves And it's hard to realize that we play a part in everything. I mean, we aren't victims to our situations as much as I would like to be sometimes, and it would be easier to be, but we're not. You know, we play a part, and we play a part in actively, you know, in our abuse, and actively participating in letting people abuse us, you know, or just mistreat us. And I know people get really caught up and angry when they hear the word abuse. They just, you know, want to turn it off. Or, you know, abuse is just it's a general, I use it a lot, it's a general term, but it can be used, and you can abuse someone in very different varying levels of ways. And it's teaching me, yeah. And so I had asked my parents to do the test just to see, because if I was wrong, I wanted to know I was wrong. You know, I don't want to call my parents narcissists if they're not narcissists. I don't want to call it's a title. I mean, I don't need to have a title for it, but disordered. I don't want to do that. I didn't want that to be the case. You know, I went to treatment thinking that I was defective. There's something wrong with me. And I wanted my family to love me again and accept me and bring me back in with open arms. And I thought I needed to go get fixed and go get the help in order for that to happen. And that's not what happened, because what I found out is that I wasn't defective. I wasn't broke. I mean, I wasn't as destroyed as I thought I was, that it was them that were unhealthy, that were so incredibly unhealthy. And so was I. I mean, don't get me wrong. And dealing with it in even more destructive ways. You know, at least their dysfunction, they didn't, you know, handle with massive amounts of alcohol and to numb. So I don't want to to put this label on my family if that's not the case. So I offered this up, and I didn't get into why or whatever, but I figured, you know, it shouldn't be an issue, because their family theme, the motto, you know, there's always like something that they'll repeat over and over and over again, where people just start to believe it. And their great grandparents, their grandkids come first. Their grandkids come first. That's the theme. This is, in reality, part of it's true, part of it's not. They come ahead of everything else because they're their, you know, most substantial form of supply. But they don't, in a sense of, you know, their needs or what's actually good for them. And so I didn't get a response from my dad. He did end up messaging me back later saying, I'm willing to take it if it's online. I'll consider it. So that was their response. So knowing that they could, one, disprove anything I said about what they, you know, how they had acted, their behavior, or what they potentially were. It's not about naming them as it's this or that, but there was toxicity in my family growing up. I can say that. And I understand that people don't like that I put names on it or titles on it, but it is what it is, right? And if I'm wrong, and all these things that you say that I claim are wrong, can be proven and can be disproven, why wouldn't you do it? There's only one reason, right? Because the truth would be exposed. Or, you know, on the other hand too, if I'm saying, you know, hey, you may not agree with this, you may not like it. No one wants to be asked to take a test to see if they're disordered. I get that. But if it's what's going to secure your time with your grandkids and give people comfort knowing that they're going to be safe with you, I don't see why that would be a huge issue either. You know, unless I'm missing something, which please throw it out there. If there's other things you can think of, unless I'm missing something, I found it really interesting that when given the opportunity to completely disprove my, you know, my claims, and to secure their time with their grandkids who they claim to love so much and be, you know, put ahead of everything else, they chose not to do that. Which I found was very interesting. You know, and I'm glad that I went there, and I'm glad that I gave that opportunity to them to do that. And I did it because it's not because I wanted to prove them wrong or prove, you know, myself right. I want to be wrong. I want to prove myself wrong. It's still hard for me to accept that I grew up in a family as dysfunctional as mine was. It's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that my parents don't want what's best for me, and that they don't love me, and that my siblings, you know, what I have to remember with them too is that they're as abused as I was, just different, and they're choosing to cope with it differently. But the thing about me is that I was different. I was the truth teller. I was the one that, you know, stuck up for people, and I was the one that would go out on a limb and stick my neck out for someone else, and had like I've always had this sense of like justice that I need to uphold. Like I felt like it's a responsibility of mine to be a voice for what's right and what's wrong. And I've never, people say all the time, it's not your place. Why do you care? Why do you want to get involved? What does it matter? I just do. I can't tell you why, but I'm the only one in my family who's like that, and that isn't. And it took me going through treatment. It took me being broken in my addiction to realize that, that broke a lot of stuff off of me. I mean, I was probably headed and on the way to being a pretty disordered, narcissistic human as well. I mean, I wasn't in a great place. And between, obviously, my relationship with God and what my new faith brought into my life, and what finding out who Jesus was and having a relationship with Jesus was very, a huge experience for me. But it was realizing that I wasn't any better than anyone else, and having to get really humble and having to get really, really real about myself. And it took a long time. I was in treatment for a year, and I did a lot of work. And even at the end of that, I was still in a hard place. I still was nowhere near healthy. I mean, healthier, but I was still very dysfunctional. I mean, you don't just break this stuff off and change overnight, but it was a start. And I just kept looking in. A lot of people will look in, and then they do enough work, and then they stop. Then they look out. They're back out because they're done. It's too hard. And I mean, we all get like that in times, but I've really kept trying to fix things, because when you realize that you can fix things and you have that control, when you realize that you have the power to change your life, change your situation, change your perspective, it's very addicting. And I wanted to keep it going. What I uncovered is I had no idea how deep this stuff went for me. I mean, it was like Pandora's box was getting opened, and it's been like that ever since. So I get nervous sometimes talking about it openly, because I know that there's backlash. But that's the other part too, is that once it's exposed, once it's out there, once they know, they tend to and have at times backed off. And that's my hopes, because right now I don't see my daughter. She has been severely alienated and brainwashed to fear, reject, and hate me. It's been the most painful experience of my life. And I told my mother that I needed to be estranged, my family, that I needed to separate from them in December of this year, because they just were not, they were very treatment resistant. They were not willing to work within my boundaries. They weren't willing to have conversations that were going to lead towards any kind of resolution, and it was just really damaging for me. And so that's when February is when the alienation started, and both my children were taken. But my mom told my daughter a bunch of lies, and my daughter told me this, and that's why she has now since hated me. She said that I wasn't abused, that they convinced her I was not abused. I was the abusive one, and I don't blame my daughter for believing them. It's still hard for me to believe that they're bad. My parents have done, I was going to bring it out tonight, but I got a gag birthday gift this year. My mom, she sent me a text on my birthday, and I rarely hear from my mom. She blocks me quite a bit. But now I've had a little more interaction because of the kids, because she's one of the only people that has, connections to my daughter. I have to keep anybody around that has a connection to my daughter, to keep some open form of communication there. I don't have a choice, right? And they talk to my son. So she sent me this text on my birthday and was like, "Happy birthday to my firstborn daughter," and this happy birthday bag. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. That inner child just broke down. And I was so I was crying, and I just maybe my mom really does love me. Maybe, maybe I'm wrong, because I go back and forth. Is she bad? Is she good? Is she bad? Is she good? She can't possibly be this bad. It must be me. It must be me. I must be crazy. I must be, projecting feelings from someone else onto her, I keep thinking that because I want to give any reason for them not to be what they are. But so when I finally got the gift on my birthday, they dropped it off because they wanted my son for the day. They took off, and I opened it up, and it was a glass vase with some plastic flowers and Whoppers, which are my least favorite candy in the world. And my mom knows that. And it was in a bag of used clothes that weren't my size. So, I mean, you might be wondering, like, how do you know it's a gag gift? It is a gag gift. My mom she's a perfectionist. She likes brand new things. She likes nice things. She's very, very picky, very choosy about what she likes and gives people and things like that. It's nothing that she would have ever bought. It's not like she just has bad taste. And it was my least favorite candy. It was very intentional. And I opened it up and I'm like, okay. Like it was a joke. Like it was done because one, it made it look like she gave a gift. And so if anybody would have, she still gave her a gift on her birthday, even though she, her daughter thinks she's a narcissist. She still gave her a gift. And if I say anything to her about it, I look like I'm being ungrateful because she shows her text messages to my siblings, my sister specifically. She'll instigate things with me, fights with me, and then she claims to be deaf. My mom is not deaf. My mom claims that she can't hear, has for years. I found out this past year she's not deaf at all. She can hear just fine. But that makes everyone have to communicate with her via text message. And so if you know a narcissists love texting. They abuse so easily this way, and they delete text messages a lot too, so be careful. They do show every message you have to other people, and that's how they triangulate quite a bit. Screenshots too, but mostly in person. And so I have to be really careful about how I respond. So I didn't respond, but then she texts me back, I'm sorry you didn't like your gift, and it's one of those things where it's like, it hurts. It's so hurtful, and that was my whole life, was people that I loved who were intentionally inflicting harm and mind games with me. And people don't understand that actually happens to people. And so the victims I don't like to use the word victims, but the people who this is happening to convince themselves it's not true either, because if I tell you, my mother is sadistic and she likes to play mind games with me and she thinks it's funny and she likes to hurt me and sabotage me and wants to see me kill myself, no one's going to believe that. People are going to think I'm crazy. I mean, honestly, unless you know and you understand, but that's what's happening. That's how my life has been. And at this point, I'm not concerned with convincing anybody anymore. There are people around me who see it and do know. I have someone who I have to call my best friend for 20 years. And when I start to get nostalgic, good feelings about my mom or my family, and I realize my dad is just as covert as my mom. Everyone always thought that my mom was the very abusive one, or the very, mentally ill one, or one who wasn't well. My dad is very covert. I mean, I realize this, it's pretty bad. Anytime I call him with good news, or I'll tell him something good's happened, it's like he gets mad. Like he's mad that something good happened. It's insane. When I got a lawyer who was willing to help me out with my kids when my kids have been kidnapped, when someone offered to help me, he was angry. I remember asking him, Dad, you're acting like you're on my side. You're acting like you're trying to help me. You're giving this illusion that you're trying to help me and that you're here for me. And yet when something good happens, you're angry about it, which is not, that doesn't match up. And it's because their words and their actions don't match. And we are so stuck on believing people's words and wanting to feel like this is how we want to feel. This is how, they're telling us what we want to hear, but they're not doing it. We got to stop that. We got to stop. If people are doing, if we know, if they're doing the opposite of what they say they're doing and showing us, telling us who they are, and we don't believe them, that was at this point, it's my fault. But I'll call my best friend up and I'll say, I'll tell her about it. And I'm like, could I be wrong? Could I be wrong about my family? Is it me? Could I be wrong? Could I be making a mistake when I believe this about them? And And you know what she says to me every time? Kaylin, nobody wants to believe that their parents are evil. No one wants to believe that they have awful family members, awful parents who don't want the best for them. And, you know, she's right. Because they've shown me, they've given me every piece of information plus more that I need to know their true intent. And it's not just parents, it goes for anyone in your life. People that we get confused about whether they're good or bad, or we should leave or not, stop listening to what they're saying, because the things that they're saying are likely going to be what you want to hear, what society would tell you to hear, what they should say. But it doesn't mean that because they say it that they're doing it. And it doesn't mean that, you know, just because someone says something doesn't mean it's true. I mean, honestly, if you're someone who has integrity and says things that, you know, are honest, you expect everybody else is doing the same thing. But when you are stuck in amidst toxic people, which I have been, I mean, I'm not talking one or two people. I'm talking mine was so severe as a child that I literally am drawn and only go into situations that are completely toxic. Normal situations for me, or healthy situations for me, feel bad. They feel wrong. They feel off. They feel like there's something there because they're healthy. So I am drawn to these toxic, abusive, damaging, whether it's work or friends or churches. I mean, I was in a church for 2 years after my recovery where I experienced spiritual abuse like you would never imagine. I mean, I've just walked right back into it over and over and over again. The narcissistic victim syndrome. I want to be done with it, you know, but I've had to basically cut off almost every relationship that I have. I've had to set boundaries with everyone, and those who could keep the boundaries, those who respected the boundaries, those who genuinely wanted what was best for me and showed that through their actions, not just their words, you know, are still all here. But I lost most people in my life, which was very disappointing but encouraging. Since I'm able to see things a lot more clearly, and I'm able to sort through what's real, what's not real. And, you know, I'm not great. I still have, you know, there's an ex-boyfriend that sometimes I'll still reach out to, and I probably shouldn't, but it's hard to know who you can and can't trust, because, you know, not everyone in your life is going to be this disorder. There's the severity that, you know, my parents were and my ex. So you want to be careful. And if you're like me, you're an overthinker, and you don't want to think something of someone that isn't true, because you know what that feels like, right? So it's just being very, you know, in DBT you learn how not to use the black and white thinking. Someone doesn't have to be good or bad. Someone doesn't have to be abusive or not abusive. I mean, people just are, right? And there is an in-between, and that's a good place to be. And I might just not know. You know, I reserve the right to, you know, I don't believe if I have a new person in my life who I'm talking to and red flags start going off, because they do. I notice red flags everywhere now. I mean, it's hard for me to walk into a store and not like feel and see narcissists. I mean, people talk and I'm like, narcissist. I mean, and it's very frustrating to me, because I'm like, this entire world is full of narcissists. I just see the red flags everywhere. But just because there's some red flags here and there doesn't mean that's what they are, right? It has to be patterns. It has to be consistent patterns over the course of a long period of time. But it's shut me down quite a bit from having relationships and from people. And so I have to remember that just because things feel that way in a moment, or just because I see something that I think might be concerning, does not mean that that's the case. You know, like it could be, it may be, they may be a narcissist, or they may be a toxic person, but it's just that they might. And I could be wrong about them, and I might feel like they're not, and they could be. You know, it's just this. I've had to learn how to be in the in-between, in the middle. People that are out there, please comment or say something. What are your experiences with this? Do you have what people in your life are the toxic people that do you recognize, like, it coming from your childhood, from your family at all? I mean, I know that a lot of people I meet that are in toxic relationships as adults with significant others, that it came from their childhood. It doesn't have to. You can just accidentally end up with a covert narcissist that brainwashes you long enough into, having these, toxic things ingrained in you. But generally it comes from your childhood. Who out there has experience with this? Anybody? Let me make sure I have my messaging on. Because I know I will tell you, I didn't even know that there was anything unhealthy about my family. I thought that I had a great family parents who sacrificed everything for us. And, they didn't have a life other than us. That's true, but that's because they didn't have friends, because they couldn't have friends. It's because they used us for themselves. I mean, we were used. We still are. And it's hard to realize that. We're put in a role to meet a need of theirs. And I found myself doing that even some as a parent, making my kids extensions of me, wanting them to look a certain way or do this or that to be a reflection of me, so people would see me a certain way. And you know what? I did that for probably the first few years of being a parent, a new mom. And I tried to get my validation and my worth through my children. And you know what? It had to stop. And it had to be to a point where I remember my daughter wrote something for her school, and it was like in one of those books where they write things about their mom and dad and their families. And she said some really mean things about me. And I got really, really upset. And I remember being really angry. And I remember thinking, why would she write this? She had to write this because her she must be writing this so her dad thinks this, or it's her dad's fault. It was someone else's fault. This wasn't true. I didn't want to look at me. But you know what? I sat there and I'm sitting there going, there was nowhere else to look except for, you know what? Maybe this is true. Maybe part of this is true. Maybe she does feel this way about me. Because at first I was like, she doesn't feel this way about me. There's no way. She called me annoying. She said some other things. Her dad was so great and this and that, and said some things in there that literally weren't even true. And I knew were not completely honest. And then my stuff, claiming I made her do dishes and chores and all the stuff that just wasn't the case. My children do not. I mean, they are no. Things I appreciate about her is how fast she could do the dishes, how she could get through them. I think my child might have done the dishes one time at that point. I mean, because she wanted to. I probably, to a fault on the other end, didn't make my kids do things, which I also had to change and isn't a good thing. But it was so opposite of the truth that I was so frustrated. I finally had to look at myself. I'll never forget that moment. It's a pivotal moment for me where I said, you know what? Maybe she really does feel this way about me. And then I had to go figure out, that was possibly true. What am I doing? How am I showing up? How am I showing up in this? Because how I show up in situations is that's the only thing I can change. And that actually is not like, oh, I can only change myself. People say that like it's not enough. You have so much power over your situations just by how you look at it, how you show up, how you choose to show up. I mean, you can change a situation and other people's reactions by how you manage, dealing with people and communicating with people. That's just the truth. And so I had to change a lot of stuff. And I mean, it's a daily thing. Like I wasn't as present with my kids as I should have been. I focused more on, cleaning and doing stuff and not being present with them and liking the things that they liked and, being in those moments with them. I wasn't good at that because I didn't ever have that. I didn't know how. I knew I loved them, and I cared about them, and I would do it in moments, but it was all kind of conditional on how I felt and if I was willing to do it at the time. It still was about me. And it was really hard to break out of that, and very hard to, and it still is, to break out of it. We can say it's the best thing for our kids or it's the best thing for them. And we can be saying that all day. And really what we mean, it's the best thing for us. It's the best thing for us because, it's just a better way to say it, right? But if we get really real with ourselves, No. We can justify things, and we can, convince ourselves of things. It's still bullshit, and you need to have people around you that can tell you that, like if you have all yes men around you, their dad, other people, he's got people around them that just tells them what he wants to hear. And that when he tells them what a absent mother I've been, and how I'm so unreasonable, I'm just such an unreasonable person, and I'm so hard to deal with, and I'm just impossible to deal with. That's what's said. There's no dealing with me. I'm hopeless. I'm a horrible mother. I've damaged and broken my children. I have the text messages. I've literally damaged and broken my children because of how damaged and broken I am. That's what they say about me as a mom, when it couldn't be further from the truth. I was very broken for a long time. I was not a healthy parent for years, and I did the best I could with what I had, but it was bad. It was shit. It really was. And until I learned, I love them, I tried, but I used them for emotional support. I told them more things than I should have. I made them responsible for my feelings. I made them responsible for my well-being. It was sick. I look back now, and that's like some enmeshment, it's icky. It's icky. It makes me sick to think that that's the kind of parent I was for a time. But I recognized that, and I changed it. I didn't try to justify it and say, well, I did it because, no, it was toxic. It was bad. And I've had to undo a lot of those things. It's not just him that did stuff. It's not just I play a part in this too. And I'm not a complete victim in the situation. I am a targeted parent of alienation. And I have the decision and the choice every day to either, continue and walk into that role and succumb to that role and succumb to what the world and the people around me want to tell me that I am, or how things are going to be, or I can do something different, and I can actively try to be different than what they tell me I am. Hi, Carrie. How are you? It's so good to see you. I've known Carrie for a while. I'm just talking about just some stuff going on with the kids and my life, and I know you've had some stuff with your daughters, and I just want you to know I pray for you a lot, think of you a lot, actually. But yeah, so I am in a place right now where I'm trying to learn and see who around me is healthy, who isn't, and fight for my kids, because my kids right now, it's the most important thing. And it doesn't matter who tells me that I'm an awful parent, I'm broken them. I'm the one who's giving them the healthy tools to succeed in life. I'm the one that's trying to teach them. I'm the one that's trying to use the things that the devil's meant to take me out. My addiction was what taught me what was healthy. I wouldn't have known what a healthy behavior was had I not gone to the depths of my addiction and been forced to go somewhere and learn how to live like a normal adult, like basic adult functioning. I didn't have that. And my children were not going to have that either, because they don't have parents that have that. So I am the only one who has even offered any of that, put that on the table for them to have. And I'm not going to listen to people who tell me otherwise. People who want to say, well, you were an addict, you're an alcoholic, so therefore you're just a bad mom. That's bullshit. It's the furthest thing from the truth. It can be the case, but it does not have to be. And I'm not going to allow anyone to tell me that it is. I'm just not. Because it's not true. You can take, people who recover are some of the most intelligent, complex, and interesting people out there. And we can take those skills and give them to our children and break generational, cycles. That's amazing. And I'm not going to let anyone tell me anything otherwise. Just because I've done drugs, just because I've drank. So therefore no. My mother's told me that, God didn't intend some people to be moms. Some people just don't deserve to be moms. And I'm one of those people, apparently. That I need to do the right thing and let my kids go and give up being a parent, because until I can fix my addiction, or until I can know for sure that I'll never relapse again, or never, until I'm not an addict anymore, that I shouldn't be a parent, and that I should leave my kids. And there's times where, and in certain situations, that I would have believed that, and I would have actually have done it. And it's so sad that people believe that. I mean, my mother abused me my entire life until this day, and just because she, didn't choose to numb or cope in that way, she coped by, by abusing and by control. I mean, she found other ways to, fill her void. And I didn't. I self-sabotage. I self-destructed as opposed to hurting other people. But that's the one thing that is looked at, and she uses to say I'm a bad mom, and that she's a better mom than me. And it's not. I'm not buying it. I'm not taking that on. And a lot of people do that. They really do. They look at people in addiction, or people in recovery, people who have come through addiction. I'm certainly not in addiction. And they assume that you must have been an awful parent, because addicts or alcoholics just must be awful, and that's not the case for every situation. And people need to be a little more open-minded when it comes to reality, especially people who suffer from substance use disorders. So I want to just say thank you to everyone for popping on and listening to me vent some. Again, I think it's interesting. If you guys have any thoughts on why, when given the opportunity to disprove their personality disorders, mental illness, why they wouldn't do it, reasons why they would not take the test, I think that would be really helpful for me, because it seems like a no-brainer to me, and I would do anything. I actually would do anything needed to be with my children. They say it a lot. I actually mean it. So bye everyone. Thank you, and I hope you guys have a great week. And just remember, take care of yourselves. Be good to yourselves. Remember who you are, and don't let anybody tell you what you are and who you are, because you make that decision, no one else. Bye from Minnesota.